Welcome back to the Global Gaming Woman Fair Game podcast. I'm your host, Anika Howard, and I'm joined here in the Light and Wonder podcast studio with my lovely co-host, Bronwen Gregg and Lauren O'Brien. Welcome back, ladies.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Yes. I'm excited because today is our kind of continuation of our Casino 101 series, and we have a really special guest in studio, Adriana Zirpoli. And actually, this is going to be my very first in-studio interview for the Global Gaming Woman podcast. So I'm really looking forward to that. I didn't have one last season. But, I thought we'd have a little bit of fun and talk about, just your first experience in gaming. I remember, for example, when I was interviewing for the President's Associate Program and even for my internship with Harrah's, now Caesars, one of the things they asked me was, had I been to casino? And I realized that even coming into the casino industry, I had not. I think I might have went one place with my aunt or something like that, but I had not really had any casino experience. And I thought, this is going to be interesting if I'm going to get this opportunity. But since then, I've kind of had some really funny experiences. I remember learning to play craps in downtown Las Vegas. I can't even remember. I think it was Four Queens. Is that the name of the?
Oh, I think they do free lessons.
Free lessons, stuff like that
Good
too.
To know. I want to know.
And nobody remembers. I can't remember it, but there's when all the bikers are in town, whatever that is, there's something that always, annually there are a bunch of bikers in town. But that's how I learned. I learned around to play craps at the crap table with a bunch of random bikers. Well, not random.
Sounds like
not random bikers,
Yes.
but very interesting, colorful bikers from around the country that converged here in Las Vegas.
The vision in my head of this happening.
It's probably exactly
hilarious.
as you envision it.
It's wild.
So, but Bronwen, what about you? I know we were talking earlier.
Yes. Oh my God. Wait, I just had a vision of you as almost like a Ginger McKenna vibe, playing craps. It's not Robert De Niro. It's just bikers watching you.
Like that too.
Gosh, that's so funny. Also my favorite movie. But no, I actually, similar to you, Anika, I never would have guessed, right, that I would end up in this industry. And I had never even touched a slot machine until I moved to Las Vegas. I remember, funny enough, it was also downtown Vegas, old Vegas, where I put a 20 into my first slot machine. We were out for one of my friend's birthdays, and it was gone in 2 seconds. And I was like, are you kidding? That's how it works. I was like, what? But I just love the vibe now. May not be a big gambler, but I just love the vibe.
Mine's a complete opposite of you. I was born into this industry.
Yeah,
so
legacy.
as a kid, I was born in Atlantic City, so I've lived in gaming towns my entire life. I went from Atlantic City to Las Vegas. I went to school in Reno. It just was around me all the time. And I remember learning the ins and outs of the different kinds of things you could do in a casino, slot machines, craps and roulette. But I do remember my first actual gambling experience when I was 21. I turned 21 in Atlantic City at the Borgata with my family, and they all took me to have my first drink, and we were all together, and I wanted to play blackjack, which is the most intimidating thing on the planet.
Thank you.
In college, I studied these games and I know the rules, but then you sit down at the table and you're like, this is so scary.
Yeah, it's too quick.
You're the pressure that the other people around the table put on you to count fast. And I'm like, please slow down. I can't count that fast.
Thank you.
Yes. I love playing. I love getting the experience, especially now in my role at Aristocrat and watching people make games. It's so fun to see their final product and their outcome, and I love playing them. But I've had a long history in this industry, and it's been since I was a kid.
Now that you say that, I remember when I was still here in Las Vegas and we were launching sports betting. We were building the sports betting app. And one of the things that I had come to enjoy was just going to sports books, sitting down, kind of observing, watching, being part of that interesting vibe, understanding and talking to people and understanding their really interesting rituals of things that they needed to do or their strategies for luck. And so it's, I think this industry is just so dynamic, and I enjoy it.
Have you ever placed a sports bet?
Yes. Oh, I
It's
had to. Yeah,
intimidating.
it's very intimidating the first time you kind of go up and,
Yeah,
and do
walk
those
up and
things
give
that
like
too.
numbers and like tell them what bet you want. Like you're like,
And this
I
line
can't
is
mess
so
this up.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I don't want to
Gosh.
mess this up. This
I
is
wore
huge.
full pink to place my first bet at a sports book.
Very
I wore all
Elle
pink.
Woods view.
Yes, and I was running around. I was like parlaying in pink, and everyone was like, "No one says that. What are you doing?" It was like March Madness 2021 at Circa. Shout out Derek. I was like parlaying in pink. It might
I
have been my
love that.
Instagram caption.
Yes.
I can also see that in my head right
I
now.
can see that very, very clearly. No,
Oh my God.
but that's also why I love this Casino 101 series, because all of these things can be super, super intimidating. And even if you're,
Yeah.
playing for the first time, or now even on the back end of this, starting a career and wanting to be part of some of these things and trying to figure out where to start, I really like that we can bring in experts that can help navigate that. And
Yeah.
so the lady that we're bringing in, I'm going to refer to my notes, although she is a friend, so Adriana Zirpoli. And I'm just really excited to have her share some of the experiences that she's had. So she's my first in-studio guest, as I said before, and she's currently the corporate vice president of gaming operations for Affinity Gaming. But I've known her for over 15 years, and she was a president's associate, as was I. And she's had most of her career exclusively in gaming operations and slot operations, which is very rare because it's a very male-dominated field. But what I love about her is that she has a very measured and easy approach to explaining and talking. And she's been a great mentor for lots of just professionals in gaming, not just women, but in general, because she has a very generous heart, and the way that she approaches her leadership style, et cetera, has been really, really good to just helping people develop their expertise in that field. So I'm very excited to have her join us in the studio today.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Okay. So, with that, let's get into it. I don't think we need to delay any further.
Yeah, let's do it.
Spend some time with her. Thank you.
Yay.
Oh, hi, Adriana. I'm so glad to have you here. Welcome to the Global Gaming Woman Fair Game podcast here in the Light and Wonder Studios.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, so I'm really happy. You're going to be part of our Casino 101 series. And what we try to do is, every few episodes or so, really have an opportunity to share out tips and tricks and really start introducing, both through experiences and education, our audience into kind of what are the different opportunities as they, want to navigate their career within gaming.
Sure.
So appreciate that. And I thought no better person than you based on your experience. And I just know, just even for me personally, a lot of the insight that you've shared. So with that, I would love you to talk to the audience about your background and your origin story and what made you kind of gravitate toward the field you're in.
Sure. So my beginning is kind of unique. Out of college, I was in accounting, believe it or not, and probably never imagined that I would be entering the casino gaming world. But after a few years in accounting, I decided I needed to do something different. And so I made a decision to go back to grad school, and I just wanted a different type of opportunity that challenged me, that was not the same thing over and over again, but really kind of expand my horizons a little bit. I never knew that it would be gaming. But I had an opportunity, and I attended the University of Michigan through a fellowship. And one of the companies that sponsored the fellowship was a company called Promise, which you may remember.
Yes, I remember
from
Promise.
the early days.
Yeah.
Yeah. So during my time at Michigan, I would get letters from Promise and said, "Hey, think about us," because my family was based in Memphis at the time, and that's where Promise was. And for the audience, Promise was the company before Harrah's Entertainment. So they owned the casino side as well as the hotel side of the business. And so during my time at Michigan, the company actually split off, and Harrah's Entertainment was born. And so during my second year, I had an opportunity to come out and interview here at Harrah's Las Vegas, and that's how I kind of got my start. It was they have a president associate program where they hired MBAs from around the country to learn the business and to have an impact on the business as well. And so, but I never knew. When I was graduating, I was telling my classmates that's where I was going. They're like, "No, really, you're not going to Las Vegas?" I said, "Yes, I am." Yeah. So that was kind of how it started. And I'll tell you that when I first came out to interview, I had like 10 interviews. And I remember when I was thinking about making a career change, I kept thinking like, I just want to have fun in my next job. Like, I know work isn't always fun, but it can be. And so when I came out and interviewed here at Harrah's Las Vegas, there was 10 interviews, and no one knew that. It was something I just thought to myself. And in those interviews, people kept talking about how much fun they had coming to work. And nobody knew that. And so like half of the people that I interviewed, because it is a fun industry, right? Yeah. It's the entertainment world, and you get to see all these people coming out and enjoying themselves and things like that. So that's kind of how I got my start. And little did I know that how much I would love this industry. So great opportunity, but you have to be open to, I want to do something different. And sometimes you don't have to know exactly what it is. I was very fortunate to come across this opportunity.
I mean, I think that's how we connected initially, both being former president's associates. I think it was in a training. Can you talk to the audience about kind of that initial experience as a president's associate and what that looked like?
Sure. So the great thing about when I decided to go back to school is I wanted to be able to move across fields. And so sometimes you get into some industries or some companies, and if you start out in one area, that's where you're going to stay. But what I appreciated about the associates program is for the first year, you're basically rotating through the different disciplines: HR, marketing, gaming, finance, all those different areas. And I remember when I came my first day, I had a new GM that I didn't interview with when I first started, a new division president, a new mentor, but all of that worked out fine because I remember him asking me my first week, like, what do you want to be in a year? What job do you want to have? What title? How much money do you want to make? And I was, well, if you ask me today, this is what I think. And I thought I was going to go down the marketing field. Never imagined it would be gaming or slots specifically for me. But I was very fortunate. My mentor that I was partnered up with from the beginning was the director of slots. And so that's kind of what got me interested in, wow, there's so many facets to it. I was so fascinated by it. I'm an analytical person, and there's a lot to analyze in that part of the business. So having that opportunity, but I still did my rotation in other areas because it helps you understand. And the other big thing I'll say is the networking, like the networking that you get to do very early on, not just, within your property, within the different departments as you're rotating, as well as with different associates like yourself and me. And everybody's across the country in different areas. So really early on, the networking that you get to do in that type of a role was very beneficial for me.
And so you mentioned something that was part of my next question, that when you first started out, you thought, okay, marketing. So definitely it sounded like the influence of your mentor swayed you to slots. But what else about that kind of kept you? You talked about being analytical. You talked about some of those other things. But what are the things that if someone's looking for, like, this is something that they might be gravitating towards?
Sure. So for me, one of the great opportunities that I had when I joined and when I was doing my rotation through slots, and like you said, I do feel like the influence impacted me significantly early on, was the company was doing a program called Game Space. And so, like I said, I'm a very analytical person. And at that time, no one in the industry was doing anything like that. And basically understanding the floor and how it performs, the different types of games, the shape of the banks, whether you had a sign or not, how you position products. And so my mentor said to me, hey, can you take this project on because we're kind of struggling a little bit? And I was all over it. Yeah. So it was an opportunity for us to understand like how games perform and why they perform. And why I was so excited about it is because I was making my entry into the gaming world and meeting all the vendors and realizing nobody was doing anything like that at the time. And so all the learnings that you could get. And so it was a great learning experience for me. I got to lead the effort on the property. I got to get pulled into corporate when they needed someone to spearhead from an operator standpoint, because a lot of the folks in our corporate team were outside of gaming. They had come from the hotel side. So even though I was kind of the rookie, sometimes they looked at me of the experience that I had just being on the property. So it's those kind of experiences, like when you get to raise your hand for something and you show interest and you show like the drive and determination to lead a project like that early on in your career, those things can happen. Just don't be afraid of it. Raise your hand and take that opportunity when it comes your way.
Yeah, and I think when I met you, you were kind of leading on the corporate side. And I remember having a conversation about laying out the slot floor and going into that area. And it was great because I think it was almost all women in that department, which was very rare for operating group, and especially on the corporate level, really driving the direction for the company globally.
Sure.
So when you kind of talk about that, can you talk about kind of your specific area of expertise and kind of what are some of the things that went into that opportunity?
Yeah, and so I think it's important in a career in gaming that, as you start out, it doesn't matter where you start out. You could start out on an analyst side, you could start out as a supervisor, as a manager, whatever that is, a project manager. Take those opportunities because you learn a lot. So, for example, when I joined Harrah's Las Vegas, we were going through an expansion, a $200 million expansion on the Strip. And so we were adding casino space, restaurants, the hotel moved, the hotel tower got added. And so as you're going through all that, you're having to quickly analyze stuff. And that's how I became very close with the slot director, because I was quickly analyzing as we were making moves or changes or figuring out how the floor should look differently. And that's where you start learning a lot from those type of experiences. So that, like I said, don't be afraid to raise your hand and say, sometimes it might not even be something that they asked for, but you see the value in it as you start learning the business. And so I would come to her with different things like, hey, we could expand this area, or we could move poker to another area. We can create a dollar area, which I don't know if you remember the dollar world that we had at Harrah's with the big globe. So all those experience I took to the next level whenever I had my next opportunity. And so as I got my next opportunity and got to run a slot floor, I took those learnings and quickly started making impacts when I was at the Flamingo here in Las Vegas. And then when I went to corporate, it was taking all those learnings and now having the opportunity to share that across the brand. And so when I was in that corporate role, we, as a VP of slot merchandising, we were going through a lot of growth at the time. We were acquiring different companies, and so we were taking that same philosophy about how you think about slot floors. Now, I'll give you the example I think you're referencing is, I look at them as like retail, like retail offerings. And I think I shared the story with you about, it's kind of like when I know malls are changing these days, but back then, if you went into a department store, there's certain departments that are located in certain areas. Men's department, for example, was always close to the door because guys just want to go in and get what they want and come right out. And then, women, like the fragrances and how they, in the center of the store. So there's a way that people think about how they lay out floors in the retail world. And so we took some of those learnings for ourselves on the slot world. As well as the learnings early from Game Space. That was another one. Even though it was as years prior that we had done that, it was understanding, like, instead of libraries full of slot floors with 12, 20 game banks, we shortened everything down to smaller banks, to shapes, because shapes, it's like having an end unit on every floor. We know end units perform better, so instead of having a 12 game bank, break it down to 2 6-packs, and it improved the performance on the floor, the comfort level for the customer. I always use the example with my customers or my clients, or now my properties in the role that I'm in is, when you fly, I'm a tall person, you're a tall person. I always ask them, do you ever volunteer to sit in the middle? And they look at me like, no. I said, okay, so think about the slot floor in that way. We've got all these long banks that people have created through the years. Why would you want to do that? Because there's a lot of middle seats in there. So instead of having, like I said, the 12 bank, make it down to 2 6s, and you'll start seeing the performance improvement in that sort of thing.
No, so this is very helpful information. And so when I start thinking about someone brand new to the industry, what are the most common ways to get trained up, or entry level ways to get into slot operations or gaming operations?
Sure. I think there's not one set way, but there's a variety of things that you can do. So, for example, analysts. I love analysts because they provide a lot of data, and you want to slice and dice things up in a different way. And in the slot floor, there's so much to look at. And so as soon as you start learning about that and how the games perform and why certain games perform better than others, that's a very helpful entry point. It could be coming in on the slot operation side if you wanted to come in as a supervisor or as a manager, depending on your background and experience, because then you're understanding, so the one side is you're understanding how games perform and why we make some of those decisions. On the operation side, it's understanding how we take care of customers, how we, make sure that we can explain games if we need to. The customer service is so important. We learned that, early on in our Harrah's days, how important the customers, because sometimes you don't have all the shiny, cool stuff or attractions for people, but it's the service that's a differentiator. And we learned that early on I think it was like something we constantly
Yeah.
were being trained on.
The $1 million minute.
Exactly. So that's another area of opportunity. It could be on a project management side, on the performance or the tech side, where you're planning. Like when I was at Win, for example, I had plans going on all the time. I had an analyst that joined me from Bellagio, and he said, "Man, their schedule doesn't look anything like yours because it's always, the floor is always changing. There's
Yeah.
new products coming. There's, I would look at my reports that we would get and like what's underperforming, like my report card, what's performing well, what's not performing well, how can we make changes?" So there could be a variety of different ways like that. But just don't be afraid to raise your hand. And maybe you're in another department and you want to get into slots. Sometimes that's going to be on your own time, trying to say, "Hey, can I talking to your leader and say, I have an interest in this. If I wanted to make some rotation time to learn something, can I work with the slot organization or the gaming team to do that kind of stuff?"
And so what kind of certifications or training or skills that are important? And you lean in a lot to, just being analytical and naturally curious about the work. What are some other things that if you're kind of wanting a career on kind of in slot operations or even in tables, because I think,
Sure.
those are the two core revenue generating, casino operations areas.
Sure. I think there, I mean, not necessarily any certifications are needed, I guess, unless you're going through the technical side and you're
Yeah.
trying to be a technician or something like that, where you would have to learn the games and things like that. I think the skills are, you want to be a person that can make a difference. You want to be a person that's hardworking, that knows how to lead the teams, that knows how to interact with different departments. It's really kind of a lot of self-driven. If you have the curiosity to want to know, and maybe it's going to a G2E event in the fall and learning the games. It's making connections within your network to meet different people that will help you get that kind of opportunity.
Yeah, and you talked about just your career path and that there's not any clear direction or way that you can go to do this. What if you're in another area like marketing or finance, and now you're listening, you're like, "Hey, I think this is something that I would be interested in doing." Like, how do you pivot from someplace outside of casino operations or gaming operations? Because it always seems like that's the coveted area.
Right.
And that's usually that or finance is a path to GM. How do you then say, "Okay, I want to move into this area after I've started a career in another place. I'm in gaming today and I want to move."
I think one of the things that you learn through your career, it's not something you can do by yourself.
Yeah.
It's important to have, people within your circle, whether it's your boss, your mentor, someone within the organization that you raise your hand and you say, "I have an interest in doing this, and this is what I'd like to do. And, can you advise me on how to get there?" Because every company's different, right? Some companies do want you to stay in one certain discipline within the organization, but there's others that are open to it. And as long as you show that you have that willingness and you show that, or you want to build a skill set,
Yeah.
maybe it's taking a class, maybe it's there's always training on different stuff going on within our industry. If you raise your hand and want to do those type of things, I think it's important for you need to let people know that that's what you want to do, because they can't read your mind, right? And then building relationships within some of those departments will help you open that door for you.
Yep. And so now kind of going on to really talking about key things that people should know. So casinos are a complex business. And so what if you had to do a casino 101 class, what are the top 3 things you think everyone should know or understand about the casino floor?
So the floor is dynamic. It's constantly changing. The products are changing. When I first came in the industry, I'm going to date myself, but we really didn't have video reel games.
Yeah.
And so things started changing as that was evolving, and stepper products, which are the traditional, hand, you'd pull the handle and the reels would spin. That's all changing. That used to be the significant part of our business, and it's not anymore. And so, trying to keep up with the products and what customers like and what customers want, the pricing of products, because that's difficult. Like, we used to have 2-3 coin games now, and that could be like 10 cents or 50 cents, and now we have, $4, $5, $6 games sometimes. So that product, you have to keep up with what's going on. And what I would tell people is not only within your own building. Like, the great thing about being in Las Vegas is I've got a lot of competitors. I can walk up and down and see what people are doing. So understanding from a service standpoint, how can you take care of your players? I remember when I first started, it was like I would walk the floors and I would see people like looking for help or needing their lights going off, and it's like a sea of customers. And how do you know where to go first? How do you know whose transaction needs attention first? Or, your VIP players too. Sometimes you want to ensure that they get the best service as well. And so it's understanding that there's technology that can help you. And through the years, that type of technology started coming around, like dispatching and things like that. And so, and then also, I would say ensuring that again, I'm talking from a casino standpoint, that you're working as efficiently as possible. 'Cause sometimes within your team, you can do all the things you need to do, but you have to have these relationships with other departments, whether it's the cage, whether it's with tables, whether it's with EVS or whoever. Those are so important in building those relationships within the property. I had that experience early in my career when I had my first director opportunity. Is you can't do it all by yourself. Sometimes you need that help, and you need to have that partnership and also the connection with your employees, most important. I would have task force with my employees to figure out, okay, what are the things that I can work on that are, impacting you every day at work?
And so one of the things you had talked about, you kind of mentioned steppers and reels. Can you talk about the different categories of slot machines, just so people can know if they're hearing these terms,
Sure.
what they mean?
Sure. So steppers, also known as mechanical reels, that's the traditional slot machine. There's usually 3 reels, could go up to 5 these days. And basically, it's just a mechanical stepper reel that's what the traditional customers used to. Video reels is pretty much taken us, into the next level through these last few years. Not last few years, for over a decade. Just the traditional games have now evolved into these video games. And so before it was just 3 reels that would roll, and then you have, whatever the outcome is. Now there's all sorts of different elements with, metamorphosing of reels, all these bonuses, bonus rounds, or instead of just a traditional. And now it's not just 3 reels, there's a whole bunch of reels spinning. And so that's the majority of our products today are video reels. Then you have Keno, which is probably a really small segment these days that are out there, and then poker. Poker's the other one. The other products that I would say on the electronic side is the ETGs, the electronic table games. So you have, your traditional games that you still have on the strip, and then you have these electronic table games that, fill another segment. I think it's introducing more players to electronic table games or table games in general, as well as different price points that you can price your floor electronically versus the live games.
And can you also talk about denominations? I know at one point when it was first, it was like, okay, you had your, nickel machines, you had your penny machines, you had your, quarter machines, but now it feels like there are multi-denomination and there are lots of different things that you can do in terms of that. Can you talk about how that shifted and what that means?
Yeah, when I very first started, it was nickels, and it would go up to, $100. But the nickels were all reels at that point. And then through the years, we started introducing penny games. And who would have ever imagined? Now the penny games today, when they very first came in the market, it was more of like a 25-cent, 45-cent bet. Yeah. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we're talking a minimum of like 75 cents, 50 cents, 85 cents.
On penny slots.
So it's basically turning like penny slots into dollars, if you will, or even quarters, half dollars. But the other big change, as you mentioned, is the multi-denom. That's been, a real game changer for our industry through the years, where before it was only one denom you could play. So imagine if you've got, supply and demand challenges, and how do you price your floor? How do I figure out, I do need to have some of these lower denom, but I have a player that wants to play more. Well, now the great thing is that one slot machine could go anywhere from penny, 2 cent, 5 cent, 10 cent, could go all the way to $2 in that one same box if you wanted to. So that gives the operator a lot more opportunity as they're pricing their floor and figuring out, how do I price it now? And you do want to be careful, because as you go on the higher denom, the liability gets a little tricky, a little expensive. So operators need to be careful with that.
Okay, and so in the last question in this section is, what's something surprising or counterintuitive that you've kind of learned or experienced in casino operations? Are there things that you expect to work one way, but then you kind of get in and like, oh, wow, that's not exactly what you would think?
I think that, I think about the slot floor like a puzzle. From my early days, as I was analyzing how things were working or not. And one size doesn't fit all. There's some things that may work on a strip property that may not work in a locals or a high frequency market. And so you have to understand like what's the differences. Like even, from our Harris days, we had both of those different categories. And so one size doesn't fit all. And so you have to understand like what's different about my market. How do I think about our floors? I think even when we were at Harris Las Vegas or Harris Entertainment in our corporate role, we helped our properties understand like, hey, this works in these type of markets, destinations, but it may not work in yours. So it's not one size fits all. It varies based on the location that you're at, the frequency of your customers. So that's something to look at.
And you've touched on this a little bit, but I just want to reiterate it because I think it's an important point as people are looking for careers in casino operations. What separates those who thrive in casino ops from those who struggle? And are there any habits or mindset that you've seen in top performers, both that you have worked with or, even in your capacity because you've, now are in a corporate VP role and you've, been, I think, in kind of senior leadership positions in gaming since I've met you?
Mm-hmm. I think that one of the opportunities that people need to consider as they're looking at careers in gaming is it's all about your network. I mean, I think I can't say that enough. I came to Las Vegas, I didn't know one person, and I didn't know anything about casinos or games or anything. And the network that you start establishing early on is so beneficial to you. That was something that one of our speakers that we had when I was at Michigan talked about that, the power of your network. And I can tell you, for example, what kind of helps set people apart is when you come into an industry and you don't know anything, it's quick. You have to quickly build relationships with folks that don't know you. You don't know them, but they see something in you and you see something in them. And what I did with vendors, for example, is build relationships so that I started learning not just about like their company, but they would share with me, hey, if you're laying out your floor, these are some other companies you want to look at. I think those vendors are so valuable. And the other part is, like I said, within your property, the relationships that you build to not only, it's not just about your department, your area, you want to make it better, but what are things that you can help, like, for example, with Cage or with account teams or whatever that might be. And then the other thing is your employees, most important. That's something my dad taught me since I was a little kid about how you treat your employees and, how important that is, that they're not just there to run your gaming floor for the day or, take care of the customer, but you want to connect with them. That's the one thing I can tell you that in people that I've seen successful through their careers, and that's been very helpful for me, is those relationships that you build with them. And I'll give you an example. When I was in my first director job, and I was so excited, but they looked at me like the rookie. I was the rookie running a slot floor on the Strip. And so I would start walking the floor every day, like in the mornings, afternoons, I would make sure that I was on the floor. And in the beginning, they just kept looking at me like, what is she doing? And it was because whoever was my predecessor didn't really spend a lot of time with employees. And so, but after a while, because I was trying to get to know them, not just as my slot floor person or my technician, I was trying to get to know them. Because when you make those kind of connections, and I think, it certainly goes for your employees, but the other relationships as well. When you make those connections, they'll do anything for you. And sometimes I was remembering that their son had a baseball game, or that their mom was sick, or whatever that might be. When you can make those kind of connections with people, and like I said, at all levels, it's so important. To the point, like sometimes if my schedule was off and I didn't make my afternoon round, they would be, what happened? Are you okay? Is everything okay? Because you make that connection with them. And sometimes it's just asking them about their day or things like that. And to me, those are the kind of things that make people successful. And I always tell, it's the golden rule we learned when I was in kindergarten, I think. It's you treat others the way you want to be treated. And I do the same thing with my vendors, because I see people treat vendors in all different ways. And so, as through the years, people would say, well, why do you do that with the vendors? Or why do you, like, if they ask you, can you help them with something? I said, because one day I'm going to need help.
Yeah.
And I can be at the top of the stack or the bottom of the stack. But one day my boss is going to say, Adriana, I need you to make this happen in 24, 48 hours. And it's all how you treat people and with the respect that they will give back to you. So those are the kind of things that I think make a difference. And it's not about me, what I did, it's what we did. And so the more you have that we type of mindset, the better you are in being successful.
That's such an important point that it is really about the collective. And I think it's a Maya Angelou quote that it talks about people will never remember necessarily what you say, but they remember how you make them feel. And I think that's very, very important in anything, but especially in opportunities where you have impact on so many different people in the department. So as a woman in casino operations, it's definitely a rarity. I even know in some cases, sometimes the women are automatically not necessarily excluded, but the assumption is that because a lot of times it's weekends and it's off shift and some other things, that it's not going to be something that a woman would quote unquote want to do. Can you talk about kind of any of the challenges that you faced, or kind of what are the things that are maybe some of those unconscious bias that may have people not be considered or think this is for them?
Right. And I faced that early on. It took a while. That it's a little frustrating because people don't understand kind of what you bring to the table. And for me, as I was facing those type of things, I would, as much as I could, embrace. Whether it was getting to know system stuff, whether it was getting to know games, whether it was how do I analyze this, or going to different seminars or things like that. Anything that you can do to kind of just enhance. Yeah. I remember early on having an opportunity with a property, and they had already, I think, made their decision on a leader, but they brought me in as a consideration. And so I started talking to this GM, and I'm going on about things in the system and all these other, analysis and stuff like that. And he just looked at me and he says, "How long have you been here, like in the industry?" And so I told him, and it was because I think, even though I didn't get the opportunity at the time, and I think everything happens for a reason, right? But it showed that you can still show your worth by just embracing as much as you can. And like I said, relationships with the vendors, if that's it, like I could be across the country, and if I had a need to learn a product and I was new in that area, like when I was consulting, I would pick up the phone and call one of those vendors that I met early on. To this day, I still cherish that. Is the more that you can do you can't just get down on it. And it's hard not to get down on that kind of stuff. But you also lean on your network for advice. Like, what could I do different? When I made a decision early in my career to leave a company, and I was struggling with that decision because I really liked the company, but I just felt like it wasn't going the way that I wanted it to go. And I went to like 5 or 6 women in the industry that were within our company, and I just wanted to make a smart decision. And they understood. They said, "We know why you're leaving. We don't want you to leave, but we understand why." But one of them said, "We're just going to come back and get you later when you probably get paid more money," which that actually happened. Yeah. So I would just tell people, don't give up. I mean, there's people nowadays, I think with organizations like GGW, there's so much more support out there for women that I'm very grateful to see that because that's the kind of stuff that helps make a difference. And you just, if you are determined in what you want to do, what are the things that I need to do to make sure that I can get there? And it could be a variety of things. It could be introductions to people. And, I go back to the vendors too, because those relationships are so vital and so key. And so a lot of times, when there's opportunities out there, who do they go to? They go to the vendors, go, "Hey, what do you think about so-and-so?" And it's a way that, you start getting your name out there, your credibility out there. And that's kind of, it works, and really helping you in your career.
So I have a question that is really directed to help our male allies. How do you think the industry can better support women that are in or pursuing careers in casino operations? What are the things that you kind of look back and you said, the men that I work with or the men in the department, the men leaders could have done to make this path easier?
I think it's important for men to understand the value of what women bring to the table in terms of a leader. And so I'll give you an example. When I was at a property on the Strip, one of my employees said to me, "Hey, I've been in this industry over 20 years. I've never worked for a woman, and I don't know why, because it's been the best experience of my career." Because we're open to have, the effect that we can have on employees, and you see the value of people and maybe people that weren't recognized in the past. And I think sometimes women tend to recognize that a little bit more. And so it's important for men to understand the value of how partnering with women, we look at, as leaders, we look at things a little differently. And so, this employee said, because I was exposing him to a lot more than he ever had been before. He'd only worked for male leaders before, and the male leaders he worked for were like, "Okay, you just do this and don't ask any questions." my first week was like, okay, everybody's getting a book. We're going to analyze the floor. Here's what we're going to do because we got to move fast. And I think they looked at me like in shock a little bit because that is not something, because the value of what people bring, and I think that's, I mean, I can speak for myself, the value that people bring sometimes gets unrecognized because we think they're in these stereotypical roles. And so, and for women, it's like you have to also figure out how you connect with your male counterparts. And there's different ways that people connect. I'm a big sports fan, you know that.
Yes.
So for me, it's sports. A lot of people, even as I was a consultant of my clients, you know, to this day, I still keep in contact with some of them. And the first 20 minutes, it's talking all business stuff. And then the next 10 minutes, we're talking about our teams and how our teams did and things. So it's, people have to understand, I think for both the male and the women's side, like how do you make that connection with your counterparts?
So this has been incredibly insightful and informative. Kind of as kind of a last question, do you have any words of advice or encouragement for someone pursuing a career in gaming? Like what, you know, when you look back, almost like what advice would you give your younger self starting off?
Right. I think that don't be afraid. The road is not always easy, but if it's something that you really want, one of the things I love about our industry, Anika, is how passionate we all are. And so how, you know, as we get together, whether it's, you know, socially or a G2E event or whatever it is, our industry is so passionate about our business. We can't help ourselves. Like we could be totally outside of a business function and still we love it so much. And secondly, it's like a family. Yeah. We all look out for each other. It's helping each other with opportunities. And so I think that if you get into this industry, you won't be disappointed. It just fulfills so much in you. It challenges you. It helps you grow. It helps you learn so much about, you know, how games work, how customers react, how employees. There's so many facets to it that it's been the best decision of my career. I'm so glad I had that. Like, I just want to have fun in my job again and join this industry that has fulfilled me in so many ways. So don't give up. If it's something that you want, figure out a way to make the contacts and build that network of people that you can call on for advice and to guide. Because I'll tell you, for myself, throughout the years, a lot of the opportunities I had were people pulling me into them from my network of people that I've worked with through the years, have been, you know, one of my vendors or one of my customers or whatever it might be. Don't be afraid. The opportunity's there. You just have to go for it.
And I think that's great advice. And so I would love to wrap up this episode with some rapid fire questions. It's become a tradition with Global Gaming Women, kind of our Fair Game podcast, to do this rapid fire segment where it just gets us a chance to get to know our guests a little bit better. And I'll do it with you so that we can get through it. So are you game?
Game.
All right. So I have 3. So the first one is, what time of day are you most inspired?
I would say afternoons. I'm not a morning person. It takes me a little while to kind of get going in the morning, so I'm more of an afternoon, 12 to 3 kind of time frame is kind of my time.
You see, mine is it's late. I'm a night owl, and so I'll get my win like after, like maybe like from 9 to midnight. Usually when I have, you know, something to do kind of after dinner, after I'm winding down, I'll get a burst of inspiration right at the end of the night before I go to bed. What are you most grateful for?
My parents. My parents just inspired us since we were little kids. I was sharing earlier with you about my son, and, you know, he's at that age where he's about to go to college, and I was telling him just my parents from an early age, you know, we had humble beginnings, but they always inspired us to, if you work hard, get good grades, get into a good school, dream big of the opportunities that you can have, and we're cheering us along the way, you know, with the high points, and then sometimes you had the disappointments, but the lessons that they taught us early on and inspired me to get my education. When I knew I had to go get another one, I went. And when I knew that I was going to move to a place that I didn't know anybody, my parents were the ones all along inspiring us along the way, so I'm very grateful for them.
I mean, I was going to say family, but I must say, you know, listening to you, the same thing. I look at how young my parents were when they had me and just kind of the amazing things that they went through, and the fact that, you know, they raised 8 children. I still can't even, I can barely raise myself. And so, but just a really amazing to know that the same, they've always been there. So that's great. And the last question, if you had an unlimited supply of one thing, what would it be? I still don't know the answer to this one yet.
Wow. I think for me, the older that we get, you realize, how, time is moving so fast. And so, you don't always have the opportunity, especially I moved away. I have friends and family in Indiana and Texas, and then my family's in Memphis. And you realize how precious time is. And so my thing would be time with the people that we love, with our friends and our family. And whenever I have an opportunity, whether it's 24 or 48 hours, I try to make it happen, because you just never know. And I would say the unlimited time with the people that you love.
I mean, I agree with that. I think there was reading and doing some research on a study that said that your happiness is directly correlated to the proximity that you are to the people that you love. And so people that are kind of surrounded by loved ones kind of live longer, happier lives. So I kind of love that. That's a perfect answer and a perfect way to end our GGW Fair Game podcast segment for today. So thank you so much for your time, for your expertise, and just sharing your experiences. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's even special because I consider you one of my closest friends.
Thank you very much.